Welcome to a video for American Literature 2328. We're going to be looking at some of the key points. Hopefully everything has been going so far so well with you. I've given you the first week to get adjusted to the course and look over some details, pay attention to the modules, get through the Start Here module, and also to start going through some of the preliminary parts of the textbook. To access the textbook, as I mentioned in the welcome video, you can click here on the Norton Anthology or also on the Inclusive Access. This one takes you directly to Norton. I'll show you that. This is how I've done it. It takes you up here. You'll see the URL there is for Norton. If you click on the Inclusive Access, it takes you to the Norton book through Vital Source. Either way is fine. Let me move this down just a little bit, adjust that size just a little bit here. All right. So as you're going through the material, these are some details, as I mentioned in the welcome video. And then you have the details here about writing about, and we'll talk more about that at another time once you get ready for your first essay. As I mentioned in the welcome video, you have the time periods here and a history, a series of lectures and notes basically over the different periods. And it covers all the details of American literature. This is a handout. As you'll see, it goes back now 10 years, but you'll see it covers from what was covered in 2327, the first semester of American literature, through contemporary, which we're picking up with 1865 through today. And so you do have some information here that you really don't need to look at, and so it picks up more down this direction as you get to Walt Whitman and Emily Dickinson, and but again, it does give you some good details, and this is part of it here. Abolitionism is part of, as you get past 65, some of the details here. Herman Melville spans both time periods, and you'll see some details here with his work. And then down here is about Whitman, which is how your textbook starts. So it tells you some key details about his work, some aspects about it. 1855 was the first publication of Leaves of Grass, and essentially everything else he wrote was added to that, so that it continued to expand and become a further work. I have you some notes in there posted for you also about him and about Dickinson. And then you'll see again, it just tells you about some of the main views about these two. They have Dickinson as mainly pessimistic. I wouldn't necessarily say that. These are not my notes. This is from a publisher. But she has some pieces that are really very optimistic, really. Says there's no patriotism. Some of her works do address feelings about patriotic attitudes. And then he goes into the rest of the works here, and you can see the details about these. And that helps you understand some of the key points that the works that you're asked to read do cover. So that you can go through. Hopefully you've been going through those and getting some background for you. And that's why I've given you this first week to try to adjust to those and get you some of those background. The way the modules are set up, as I mentioned in the welcome video, I have volume C, and then you have volume D and volume E. And to extend beyond volume C, I also have pulled out for you Whitman and Dickinson. This is a module I actually have for my American Literature 2327 course. I just moved it over here. So you do have some notes over Melville, Whitman, and Dickinson. Melville is covered in our book to a certain extent. But these are just some notes I have typed up about some of the key themes and attitudes. I focus on Melville with Billy Budd because the work actually it wasn't really finished, but was published in 1924. So it really fits into our time frame of what we're looking at from 1865 to the present. So that was the notes are there about him and for Melville and about that particular work. Then Whitman, of course, and Dickinson are both in our textbook. They start off. So I give you some views here, some points and attitudes. As I said, her writing in the lecture notes that you have from the publisher talk about being pessimistic. It's not always that way. She does have doubt and apprehension, but she actually does have some other views which are not. And you'll see, for instance, this one I included here, that really has sort of a very promising attitude. You know, land ho eternity, ashore at last. This idea about her view about what happens as one dies and where one goes. So you have some positive aspects about it. So those are some notes I have for you there. And then I also have some further notes about the two of them. Bear with it just a moment, as it takes a little while for this to call up. And so again, it's essentially the same notes that are offered here. And so I have those. So I put one with Melville, and then I have one where I just pulled out the one for Whitman and Dickinson for you. I also have for you a separate module, or excuse me, separate notes about the details of Whitman, and this is a video about him. And then likewise, I have some details about, again, biographies of these two where they don't, 30 minutes or so to watch over them. And then this is a discussion about where Julie Harris, who was renowned for her performance on Broadway, where she portrayed Emily Dickinson. The Belle of Amherst was the name of the play. And so this is a video you can watch there. So I'm going to move on past that one. And that takes us to a module I pulled out about Huckleberry Finn, the work you hopefully have started reading, and it's the focus for the next 2 weeks. I'm going to close these modules. The novel, hopefully, you're reading. If you go to the book, and this is what it looks like when you access it, the table of contents is available here, and you actually have, if I can move this over a little bit, you'll see these bars here, and that allows you to start looking through the table of contents. They actually have a search, so if you want to search, you just hit there, and you put Twain, and hit enter, and there it comes up. And you will see, again, part of the problem with the textbook pages, as you'll see right here, it gives you 2 different page numbers, which can be a little problematic trying to figure these out. I am going to go back in and put the page numbers, but each volume gets numbered separately, so that, for instance, when you look at volume E, and we'll just look at it very, excuse me, I'll have to go back up here, excuse me. If I were to go to volume E, which would be this one, and I were to click on Theodore Retke, well, now we're at E25. So the page is reset as you go from volume to volume, which can be a little, I can't just put 139. I have to put C139, and you make sure that you're aware that each volume is going to start over with page numbers. So that's why I waited to put the page numbers on there right now, to make sure you understand that when you see a page number, it's the volume, C, D, or E, and then the page number in that particular volume, which means you're still going to have to go to this and look for the content and go from there. And so just keep that in mind. With Twain's work, of course, one of the aspects, and I'm going to mention this up front, please do not be offended by the language choices at times. Throughout the novel, you're going to see the N-word. It appears around 200 times throughout the novel. It is a situation where Twain is using the vernacular, the language, the phrasing of the era. Now, the book, as you'll note, is written, and I think they give you the details here of the novel. I'm trying to make sure we have some of the details. Let me go back to Twain up here. This novel was actually published several years after he finishes Mark Twain, Tom Sawyer, The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. He'll give you the details here in his biography, and you'll see that he writes The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. He starts working as early as 1870s. The book itself does not get published until a little later, 76. But he doesn't finish and publish The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, short version, just Huck Finn, until much later. It's 1884, almost 10 years later. And so we have these details here where we go past. Oops, went too far. Let me go back here. See if I can get this to go back. There we go. So you have Jumping Frog, Calaveras County, and then when you click here, it'll take you to Huck Finn. And so it'll tell you that it was a period of 9 years as he worked on it back and forth. As it says here, he had already conceived of the sequel to Tom Sawyer in 1875, but he doesn't finish it. But what he's doing, so when he writes this novel, it's actually set in an earlier time. It's set in a time prior to the Civil War. It is a setting in which the racial tensions and the racial situations in America had not yet been addressed as fully as they would be in the 50s, 60s, and through. But Twain is looking back on that. And so when he writes the novel, it's actually in an earlier era, but he has, of course, the knowledge of the Civil War, of the Emancipation. So he's presenting for us some key ideas. As you go through the novel, please note that as Huck Finn, the character, uses the N-word, he does so when he is in a situation and an environment where that's what he knows. The people he's been raised with, the situation, the setting where he has lived, that is used. And the people who use that word, as we move through the novel, we start recognizing are really not that nice of people. The Duke and the Dauphin, or the King, Pap, and a few others. We start recognizing that Twain is using those figures to present to us the lack of understanding and even the downright uncouthness of those people from that era. The ones who simply did not know, they were ignorant of, or who were contemptuous of other people, such as the African Americans. Twain is using that to draw a very strong point, and it becomes really, really important to note that. And as Huck Finn, the character, uses the word, that's all he's ever known, all he's ever heard. But as you move through, you'll start seeing that Huck uses the word less. As he gets to know Jim, really, as he gets to understand who Jim is, that view changes. That use of the word changes. So that the ones who are using the words are going to be people we will not like. We recognize that they are not nice people. And Twain is making that point. As it says here, he shows the inelegant, rough, ignorant dialect expressions. Because that's a key point. That he's trying to show us a world where the lack of sympathy and the ignorance, meaning not knowing, predominates the society. But he's writing from an era where changes have taken place. They're not full. We're still working on many of those issues. But he has seen a world change. And he shows that with Huck Finn, who changes in his view and even in his language. So it becomes very important. I don't want anybody to feel upset or in any way offended by the language, there's a choice for it. About 10 years ago, actually a little longer than that now, a professor at Auburn University, he's now retired from there, named Alan Gribben, did a version of Huck Finn. He went through it and offered an edited version, trying to make it a little more acceptable, as his term was, for present-day audiences. He went through the entire novel, and every reference of the N-word he changed to slave. Now that edition received both positive and negative criticism. Dr. Gribben was at the University of Texas for a number of years. I knew him there. Then he went to Auburn. His reaction to the criticism was he was just trying to make it acceptable to a new generation so that the novel would continue to be read. Part of the situation with The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn and a few other novels, reactions have been made where they have been removed from teaching curriculums. They've been removed from, especially on the secondary level, and not so much from the college level, of course. We're a little more open and can express a little more about how to address these to a little more mature audience. But he was trying to, his explanation was he wanted to make sure that younger audiences would continue to read this very important novel because of what it does. This is a comment you have in your book. Ernest Hemingway, we'll be covering Hemingway later, made a comment that all modern American literature comes from one book by Mark Twain called Huckleberry Finn. He says, that's it. This is, if you want to know about American literature, this is the one to read. Everything comes from it. He says it begins and ends with Huck Finn. And that everything you need to know about America and everything you need to know about American literature is in this book. And that's one of the reasons Dr. Gribben was trying to in some way make the book a little more palatable for modern audiences. He wanted them to keep reading it. As it says here, recent readers have wondered about the racist language, treatment of Jim. If it's, it's placed on bookshelves and in classrooms. And Dr. Gribben said, no, it needs to be taught. And so he was trying to do that. This is Toni Morrison's comment. It says the argument that this novel has been identified, re-identified, examined, wagered in advance. While it cannot be dismissed, it is classic literature, which is to say it heaves, manifests, and lasts. And I think that's a really telling remark. Toni Morrison, one of our really strong African-American writers, won the Nobel Prize for Literature, recognizes that this novel has a place to be read, to be discussed. So I'm asking you to read it. I'm asking you to go through it. Yes, I know it's a long work, but it's a really good work. As you go through this is he put little comments in at different places. And this is the first comment that Twain himself put in. Persons attempting to find a motive in this narrative will be prosecuted. Persons attempting to find a moral in it will be bashed. Persons attempting to find a plot in it will be shot. No, there are motives, there are morals, there are themes, and there is a plot. So sorry to Mark Twain, but you can tell that Twain's attitude, his humor is going to be prevalent throughout this, but it's also a very serious book. In comparison to Tom Sawyer, finished in 1975, Huck Finn is a much more serious novel. It approaches details and offers comments that Tom Sawyer does not. And that's why The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn is generally regarded as a much more serious and a much more important novel compared to The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. This is a work that is stronger in what it's doing. And part of it has to do with what I was just talking about, how he uses the depiction of characters to examine issues such as racial relations, to look at issues such as the changes in society, to look at issues about America and its changes. this novel does that. And hopefully as you read through it, you're going to recognize those key points. I want to go back now to the module. And you'll see I have learning objectives, what you are expected to learn when you read this one. And so you should see it. It's a controversial book, as I've just been talking about it. There are issues of racism in it, and you have the character of Jim. And one of the key aspects that people sometimes, maybe they overlook or they just don't think enough about it, Jim is the escaped slave, but Jim is a character who comes through, and I think in the lecture notes that I showed you earlier, they have this comment. He's the best character in the book. He is one who operates out of a strong sense of care, compassion. He is a character who has a moral code that he stays with. He's a character who treats everything as important. When he meets up with Huck, he looks at Master Huck, as he calls him one time, young Huck. He looks at him as a figure who should be taken care of, and Jim is going to do his best to take care of him. It is a key point as you see that relationship with Huck and Jim is a central point of the entire novel. And Jim comes across as a major figure. He really is. And probably is, as one of the commentaries says, the most noble figure in the book. There is satire and humor as he looks at, as I was mentioning earlier, about society, the hypocrisies in the South that we see. And he's using that, looking at the antebellum, the before Civil War South, from a perspective of 20 years after the end of the Civil War. You have other details. Huck's character is going to change. It says whether or not he develops morally, I think you'll see that there is a moral development. The use of symbolism is important. It's called the Great American Novel for a reason, and why it's uniquely American. The idea about his narrative voice, Huck tells us the story, that there are details that make it realistic in its setting, and then there's a little bit of romanticism in it too. He's sort of borderlining both the realistic movement, because he's writing in that era, but he harkens back to an earlier style at times. So you have these learning objectives, and then I have for you, if you click on this is an article, and so when you click on it, it's supposed to open up. There we go. And you have to log in to our library. Same login. I mentioned this in the welcome video. It's a welcome. It's that hopefully you've watched. It's the same login you use for Canvas. So when you log in, it takes you to this article, and I point this out to you in the welcome video as well. It talks about some general views, some general concepts, some major structure aspects, and then it gives you a chapter-by-chapter summary. So as you're going through reading the novel, hopefully if you have some questions, just look at that article. This is, as I mentioned in the welcome video, a really nice video. It was a presentation that was hosted now a little over 10 years ago, the Pioneer Institute, and they looked at Huck Finn. And this was about the time that Dr. Gribben had published his updated version of Huck Finn. And so they had some discussions, and this is part of what resulted from it. And this is Dr. Mark Baldwin and his commentary about it as well. And so you can look at that one. Again, I mentioned this in the welcome video. And then here's your first assignment. So under the module, what I have for you, and it's going to jump. Maybe not. Okay, not going to jump. I have put the study questions here, and you'll see they're due about a week and a half from now. So as you're going through the novel, my suggestion is, this should already be available for you. As you're going through the novel, start answering the questions as you go through. Again, what you need to make sure you do is use details from the novel to support your responses. Make sure that you're answering them fully. Explain what's taking place and go from there. And so work through that one. And as you're reading the novel, and again, I have it up here for you, you'll see that as it says here, he talks about the dialects, the different ones that are being used. He says he does this so they're all not trying to talk alike. And so this one has particular, some when it was published in the original version, you had some of the illustrations that were put into it. This was from the first edition. And so you have that offered for you. The way it opens is Huck Finn speaking to us. You don't know about me without you have read a book by the name of Adventures of Tom Sawyer, but that ain't no matter. That book was made by Mr. Mark Twain. He told the truth, mainly. There were scenes which he stretched, but mainly he told the truth. That is nothing. I never seen anybody but lied one time or another without was Aunt Polly or the widow, or maybe Mary. Aunt Polly, Tom's Aunt Polly, she is married, and the widow Douglas is all told about in that book, which is mostly a true book with some stretchers, as I said before. And so this is what we have. We have sort of the first part gives you a little bit of a reflection to Tom Sawyer, tells you a little bit about what happened, and how this is set up. And so you have these details, and starts talking about the widow Douglas, who basically adopts him, took me for her son, and would civilize me. And now notice here how civilized is misspelled, because of course this is Huck, who's not as educated as you may think. So he's doing a fairly good job of what he's doing, but the language is of Huck Finn. The spelling is part of it. It's supposed to reflect this lack of the education. And so you have some details here, and says that it was rough living in the house. So when I couldn't stand it no longer, I lit out. And you're going to see this is offered several times about when Huck doesn't particularly want to be in a place, he lights out. He lit out. Took off, was free and satisfied. But Tom Sawyer, he hung me up and said he was going to start a band of robbers, and I might join if I would go back to the widow and be respectable. And so you have this aspect here. She put me in them new clothes again. I couldn't do nothing but sweat and felt all cramped. So the whole thing commenced again. So, all this detail about being civilized. And it's part of what we have. And so you have the details about she got out her book and learned me. Again, notice the expression here, didn't teach, it learned. Again, Tom is not as educated, so we have expressions being used to reflect that. About Moses and the bulrushers. It's supposed to be Moses and, the burning bush. He gets a little confused there, and that tells you right here about Moses being found in the bulrushes and in the basket. And so you're going to get some details there. It says, so you have aspects here that are offered. And you have Miss Watson, the sister, and what she's like. Miss Watson's one who actually is the owner of Jim. So here's the use of the N-word. And again, what you have here, you have a little note. It's now unacceptable, but at the time it was common but vulgar. And so Twain is using this to talk about issues, to bring out how Huck, this is all he's heard people say. This is how he's heard people address the African Americans. It's the word he knows. And so he's reflecting that. But as we move further in the novel, that will change. It's a key part. So hopefully as you go through the novel, again, I have it set up in a separate module for you. So you have some lectures, some details, and then you have the study questions. I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the themes of in Huck Finn on the next video. I'll be doing that one and publishing it hopefully over the weekend. I'm trying to keep these fairly short, 30 to 40 minutes, because I know that trying to watch a longer video can be very taxing on you. So I'm trying to keep this a little short. And so we're going to be, trying to keep them about 30 minutes at a time, maybe 40 minutes, to give you something to listen to as you're going through the novels or the readings, the different ones. And again, the Star here has the course schedule. And again, I don't have the page numbers up there yet. I will be putting the page numbers. Now that I've explained to you again that you'll have the page numbers listed as C139 or D or E, showing you which volume. I try to indicate that on here as well, that for week 1, it says material from volume C. And so then when we change to volume D, I have that noted for you as well. So you'll start seeing those here. And then, of course, volume E, I have it noted for you as well. So I'll be coming back to put these page numbers in here for you. So maybe it'll make it a little easier. What you still have to do is when you go to the book, though, you're going to have to go to the table of contents. And you'll see the pages are listed here. But again, it's the pages for each volume. So that as you looked at Whitman, starting about page 19, it goes to 80, and then Dickinson picks up on 84, giving some details about our life. And you'll see again, well, now we're at page 85, the short is 43. If you'll notice, when I clicked on 84, it took us to this, but it doesn't give you that page number. So you really have to go back to the table of contents and follow through here to find the authors. So it's a little bit problematic, but I'll have that for you up there, and it'll just for you. And then here again is Dr. Gibbons' commentary about the use of the N-word. So hopefully you will read these back, these materials as well as part of this. And because this is all part about the controversy of Huck Finn. And you'll see about morality, racial discourse, Toni Morrison's comments, Dr. Gibbons, and then the idea about light out Huck, they still want to civilize you. And then this is another one by Mark Twain about Fenimore Cooper's literary offenses, where he talks about James Fenimore Cooper. It's a satiric piece by Twain. So hopefully you'll read those. And what I will do, I'll put C131 to C341, because that's how far the piece actually goes. And let me get down here and show you that one. C341. So those will be the pages of 342. Excuse me, actually went to 342. I thought it stopped there. But you'll see, I'll have these pages. That's how I'll have it listed for Mark Twain. I'll have that listed. And for Huck Finn, I'll put specifically 139 to, I think it ends, 323. Yeah, 323. 322, actually, I guess, 322. So I'll put that on there. What you may have noticed is that when you click on the work, it doesn't separate you a great deal. Once you start chapter 1, you're going to go down chapter 1, and then you move to chapter 2. So you just have to click through those individual chapters. When you go to the story, though, for instance, Calaveras County, you'll notice it doesn't do that. You just go through, and it changes pages until you finish the whole story. So the pages will change per chapter for Huck Finn, but you'll have to then click the arrow to move to the next chapter. So again, hopefully you're getting through your reading, getting that handled. I'll be posting this and sending a notice that it's been posted. Again, I'll be doing another discussion of specifically about Huck Finn with a second video later this week.